Taylor. Are you here for Leaders Lead the podcast? Let's go. Hey, how did you beat me? Look, let me tell you about this podcast. We got like 5 seconds. Leaders Lead the podcast is about leadership. Not just the leader without, but the leader within. All of these leaders that I'm talking to across the country, well, across the world now, they have one thing in common, and that's that they have overcome some insurmountable obstacles to get to where they're at today. Come on, let's go. And we are back. Welcome to Leaders Lead the podcast. I have Chris, though. I was going to do this long introduction, telling everybody how great you are. But dude, we already know. Everybody knows who Chris Doe is. And I was going to tell you a story before we get started. A couple years ago, my son came to me and he's like, man, you got to see this dude, man. He's doing all the right things, all the things that we need to be doing. And he actually took some stuff from what you're doing and added it into a practice in his business. And the reason that I reached out to you is really weird. I did a post and I'm like, guess who's going to come on the show? Everybody, it was just a silhouette. It was a bald silhouette. And it was Evan Carmichael. But there was a bunch of people, people in the creative space and what it is that you do. They said that it was you and they tagged you in it. And I'm like, I know this dude. This dude looks familiar. So I looked at my text and it was my son who's telling me that to follow you. So man, we're going to do an interview. I'm going to interview you. He's going to have a conversation with you because the things that you're doing is so incredible, dude. Is crossing so many different generations. So welcome to the show, Chris Doe.
Thank you so much, Tony. Love your story. I guess Evan Carmichael and I have a similar bald profile.
Yeah, it was weird. I was thinking, if it was Chris Doe, I would do it with the hat instead of a bald head. So is that the hat, man? Is that part of, we're gonna jump right in, man.
Yeah.
Because I know we got a short time. Is that part of your branding?
It is. It didn't start out to be that way. As everybody ages, as some men do, we start to lose our hair. And then for me, I have oily skin. I have an oily scalp, right? Maybe you're blessed with something that's drier than mine. So it creates this really shiny spot. And my team, they're just like, Chris, we got to move the lights. We got to flag this off. There's moving around a lot of gear just to deal with one challenge. I'm like, would it be easier if I just wore a cap? They're like, yeah. We will have to not do this so much. I'm like, great, I'll just wear a cap. And I'm starting to wear caps and it becomes synonymous with people seeing me. This is one of the first caps that I wore. And so people were doing fan art about this. And I was like, okay, you got to just own it. So I started to be much more deliberate about my personal branding from a visual standpoint, like the glasses that I wore. And it all became part of the thing. Like even the headphones that I wear, people identified that with me.
Wow, that's super dope. And I'm glad we're talking about Brandon. I was talking to one of my students today and I just freaking screaming at him. In a loving way because I kept saying, I told him and I'm pretty sure the people down the hall could attest to this, but I'm like, if you freaking say logo and website one more time when we're talking about freaking Brandon, I'm gonna hurt you. So coming from the master, can you tell like all the entrepreneurs, because this show is Leaders Lead is about entrepreneurs leading. I believe that the great leaders of the past, the present, and the future are entrepreneurs, but we get stuck on the branding concept. What is a brand, Chris?
Okay. Now you're just going right into my wheelhouse here. And there needs to be some distinction because language does matter. The words you choose to describe what you do matter. And branding has become a really hot buzzword. And it's evident if you just search on Google or on Amazon for books that have the word branding in it, you're gonna find quite a few examples. And so we need to draw a distinction. A lot of people do make logos. So you're an identity designer if you build systems around logos, right? So you can be an identity system designer. But when you get into tone of voice, messaging, and more of the business strategic needs, you're stepping into the space of branding. It's a much more complicated and deep skill set that you have to acquire. And it's not just the visual parts, it's the business aspects. Now, I happen to love Marty Neumeier's definition of branding. It's a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So it's not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. And let me just dive a little deeper into this. I picked this concept up from Christine Lucer, who's talking about branding is impression management. We can't control it, but we can influence. And the example that she gives is when you show up for a job interview, when you show up for a date, your son will know what I'm talking about here. When you show up for a date, you try to make a really good impression. You might wash the car. You might double check your breath and make sure all the parts and pieces are all together and you're wearing your best clothes. You're trying to create this impression like you're someone to take notice of and you're going places. Your stock goes up. And that's impression management. So the person who receives that message, your potential date, looks at you and comes up with all kinds of ideas about who you are based on the way that you look, the way you sound, the words you choose, the car you drove, the places that you're going. And if enough people like your date come to the same idea and gut feeling, then it is said that you now have a brand. So most of us, actually all of us, have a brand. Most of it is unintentional, a little bit confused and muddled because 17 people, if they were to be asked this question, what is this person's brand? If they have 17 different answers, it's like you're not really guiding this at all.
I love it. I love it. So you get that feeling. And what I wanted to do with Leaders Lead was create something that was like me. Like that's why I use the black, right? Because I come from a place of no belief, right? No belief. I'm fighting. I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm an entrepreneur. I was in the corporate world. I stepped out because it wasn't fulfilling who I was. And I'm really passionate about getting other entrepreneurs to realize their greatness, something that I was watching a video that you did and I was just like, oh my God, that's it. That is so beautiful. You want to inspire 1 billion people to do a thing. Can you tell us about that thing that you want us to do?
Yes, it's very simple. The mission is to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. Those are 2 key components, a living and love. So we have to be aligned around the things that we're passionate about that give us purpose and meaning in our life. And the living part is to make sure that that is sustainable so that you don't have to work 3 different jobs just to pay for the thing that gives you meaning. And so I want to teach not only creative people design skills, but I need to teach them the business skills so that they can run a sustainable practice.
Wow. That's great that you said that because I talk to a lot of people and they have this I was going to say rock star, but not even like rock star, but the struggling artist mentality to where they're like, I got to live in my parents' basement. I got to freaking do like all the things that somebody would do. Like if they were poor, they were just trying to just hang out. But I'm glad that you said that because there's a lot of people that I'm connected with on LinkedIn. They will post the most happiest pictures. Oh my God, I'm celebrating today's anniversary at my job. And then they'll be hitting me up in the DMs like, dude, I got to come on your show because I want to create this new idea. I hate my job. So I'm glad that you said that, man. That gives inspiration. Do you ever have like any regret doing what you do right now? Is there ever a time where you're like, man, I wish I was doing something else?
Great question. And I'm asked that question quite often. And I think at the point in my career, in my life right now, if I would want to do something else, I'd be doing it already. I try to live my life with as few regrets as possible. So if there's something I want to do, I'm just going to sign up for it. The one regret I might have is overextending myself, spreading myself a little thin, agreeing to do talks or workshops and launching courses. And I'm looking at my schedule like, where's the time to eat and sleep in here? And it's a little insane. But that's the kind of pace that I run at. I work at a very high velocity and volume.
How important is that? I got told this by Anthony Trucks. He's a speaker. I had him on the show. Are you familiar with Anthony?
Oh.
Yeah, he's a really cool dude. He changed my whole mentality. My partner and I, my wife, would do my schedule, and I would say, big interview today, Christo. What I want you to do is just put just Christo on my schedule so that I can get ready for this interview. It was probably about a year and a half ago. And then I listened to this talk that he did, and he's like, dude, success loves speed. And he actually told me success loves speed. You can't, because I'm an introvert myself. I spend a lot of time getting ready, dude. I got even with this interview, notes all around just in case, right? It always is in the back of my brain. But how important is that? And do you adopt that model, the whole success, love, speed type deal as far as your schedule?
Yeah, and I don't want to say just speed, because everybody works at a different speed, so there's not one universal standard that we can apply. Excuse me for 1 second.
No, no worries.
I don't want to make sure that I want to make sure that people don't have this vision of hustle culture that just stay busy for the sake of looking busy is actually working smart. No, I want to be clear about that. But there is something about muscle memory and building up your tolerance, right? So let's just look at the world of physical fitness. You can't become jacked like Arnold overnight. It just doesn't happen. What you do is you do micro trauma. You're basically exposing your muscles to micro trauma. So it is bruised. It is torn apart. And what it does is it grows back a little bit stronger. And with a little bit of maintenance and consistency, your muscles will get bigger. You will start to burn more calories, and you're going to start to look a lot better and probably have more energy. And so I look at it like that. I like to expose myself to challenging conditions and situations so that my normal operating speed is very high compared to someone else who doesn't want to put themselves out there. So it used to be when I was teaching at Art Center, it would take me a full 2 days to recover from just being around people for 3.5 hours straight, right? Yes. So I knew that when I spoke on or taught on Wednesday, that Thursday I'm vegetable, don't schedule anything. On Friday, I'm going to start to come back online. And by Friday evening, I'm going to be like, I have my brain together again. I'm functional. And I realized that over the course of 15 years of teaching, my recovery time got shorter and shorter. And I could teach 5 hours, I could teach 7 hours. And it's just about exposure. And so I think all of us need to figure out where we want to be, what pace we want to run at, and work towards that, and do it at a pace in which we can maintain for the long haul. So my wife looks at my schedule and she wants to faint. She literally says, I look at your schedule and my heart starts moving faster just because I see how much is on it. I'm like, don't start talking like that because you're stressing me out. Yes. I'm not stressed out by seeing this, but you can see that there's two different paces. So we've come to the resolution recently. I need to slow down a little bit. She needs to speed up quite a bit so that we can be operating on the same rhythm. It's good for our life and our marriage.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for going there, man. I appreciate you for going there. So if you don't mind me asking, you and your wife, y'all are partners in your business, correct?
Yes. We're partners in life. On the piece of paper, her name is not on it. I'm the owner, but you know how marriage works. If something happens, she got half the company. So she is a partner, whether it's on piece of paper or not.
Ooh, that's really cool, because that's kind of how we do Leaders Lead the podcast. I kind of just call myself the host and she's the boss. I run around and tell people we can do all the things, and she makes sure that it happens. She's an executioner. Is it easy or hard working with your partner?
Oh, I have a clear answer on that. We used to work together. I used to be the creative director and she was my designer and animator and everything else. And I leaned so much on her. And it was one of these things where oftentimes I'm switching roles really quickly, but for her, I'm still her husband. And so when I say, oh, client said they need X, Y, and Z by Tuesday, she looks at me and she's like, don't talk to me like that. And I look back at her and say, like what? Like I'm your employee. And that's when I knew we got problems. We got big problems. And naturally, there was a fight that happened after that. And I knew if I wanted to keep my marriage, my wife and I cannot work this intimately together. And there were other problems, very pragmatic problems. For example, the two of us were the two most important people in the company. We had a small staff, but basically if we wanted to go on vacation, the whole company would go on vacation. And that was a problem for us. So for the first 5 years in business, I didn't take any vacations at all because I was trying to build a company. Later on, I realized what you have to do is you have to design your company so that it can work without you. You need to hire your own replacement so you work at your leisure, not because it's mandatory.
Yes. So beautifully said, man. I feel like you're touching a bunch of different things that entrepreneurs, they worry about, the things that keep us up late at night. It's just exactly what you said. One of my biggest fears, because we're working on scaling up our business. We've turned down different opportunities for sponsorship and this and that, but we're looking for the right one, just like we're always looking for the right person to come and work in the business. And I realized that there ain't a lot of people that's going to love Leaders Lead the podcast or any other thing that we're doing as much as I do, did you have any problem with kind of like releasing the reins to your team a little bit, or are you still intimately close with the business?
Great question. For whatever reason, even as a traditionally trained graphic designer, I don't suffer from the affliction of having to keep my hands in the work. It's not something I've ever had a problem with. So year one of launching the company, I already started hiring my former roommate, and I was just grabbing classmates and everybody that I could just to help me do the work. I got really excited around brokering a deal, understanding what the client's needs are, and facilitating that happening with my team. And this is just stepping into the management direction leadership role really early. And I always thought, like, if someone else can do this work for less money than what I'm getting paid for it, it's a disservice to myself and to my company for me to continue to do it. There are little things I still hold on to, mostly because I don't want someone literally next to me all the time, but I try to shed away as much as possible. Now, this is pretty typical for me. In a typical month, I may have 1 or 2 meetings with my team in a month of about 2 hours total time. I try to hire really good people who know how to do their job, set the agenda and goals and expectations, and let them do their work. I don't manage time. I don't manage effort. What I do is I manage outcomes. And for that, I leave everyone to do their work. So you'll get hired, promoted, or fired based on the outcomes in which you produce. You can do that in an hour. God bless you. Good luck. Everything's great.
Wow, you're a really good speaker. Have you always been so confident in speaking? And I asked this, and I noticed how brilliant of a speaker you was in this one video where you were role playing, and you're role playing. I saw the whole video, but then I saw a short clip of it, and it had like music behind it.
Yeah.
It was like you were like so like intense, but I can tell that you were speaking with passion. And you were just so calm. It was, what was the name of it? You remember the name of the video? You were overcoming the objection. I think it was the value objection. That's what it was.
Yeah.
But have you always been so confident in speaking?
No, not at all, Tony. I'm an ESL person, English as a second language. I'm an immigrant. I'm a first generation immigrant. I'm not even first generation American. And I struggled mightily with language and words and pronunciation for, I think, at least 18 years. It wasn't until I got into Art Center, started to find something I was good at, that I can build my identity around. And so as soon as I found that thing, I started to discover myself. And I started to model my speaking after people that I would see walking in the hallways, having very casual social conversations with people who were very gregarious and outgoing. And I studied them. I was like full on method acting, just studying them, the way they walk, the way they carry themselves, their shoulders, the phrasing and the tonality, and just studying it. Now, perhaps deep inside of me was a person who could have done this all this time, but I never gave myself permission. I never felt confident enough. I was always the person who was last to raise their hand and would shy away literally from every opportunity because I just didn't want to be in the spotlight. If the teacher called my name, I would just break out in a sweat. And that's how I lived for most of my young adult life. Later on, I started to realize something that my teachers tried to impress upon me in art school, in that you have to be a person who knows how to articulate your ideas, and those people are going to be poised for leadership positions. I felt, and wrongly so, the work will speak for itself, Tony. If my work is good enough, I will not have to use words. And after all, isn't that why I went to Art Center and not Word Center?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of just like passed it off, like brushed it off, like this is not good advice. But then as soon as you start your own business, you're going to be confronted with cold, hard reality versus this imagination that you have. And you're going to be in a room or on the phone with high-powered people who are making decisions about people's lives in the future on jobs that are 6 and 7 figures in size. You better learn how to communicate. Now, luckily, or unluckily, depending on how you look at this, I came of age and ran my business when it's kind of the dawn of the internet. We're mostly on speakerphone. There's not even video conferencing. Internet bandwidth is still relatively slow. So you have to develop your speaking skills first and foremost. And I remember the first few calls, I would say, when I say the first few calls, I would say about the first 2 years being in business, just heart racing, my heart is pounding, trying to find the words and just barely being able to utter what it is I was thinking, and seeing one job after the other slip right through my fingers. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the word choice. I didn't even know how to conduct these calls. And so those are very painful and expensive lessons to learn on the job. So you either learn or you go out of business. Of course, I'm here today. I think you know the outcome of that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I didn't share with the audience. You're the CEO and founder of Blind and Future. And you've made a living, and correct me if I'm wrong, off of teaching folks. And you also have a freaking Emmy. How does it feel to have an Emmy?
That is true. I made the bulk of my money doing design services, making commercials and music videos for large advertising agencies and world famous bands. One of the projects that we worked on garnered us an award for art direction and design, and that's where I picked up the Emmy. And I have to say, I'm a person who tries to be very stoic and neutral and even keeled. So winning prestigious awards doesn't really mean that much to me. I'm pretty self-assured. I understand what my value is, and an award's not going to change my own sense of worth. That doesn't really change things, but I can see how winning one or holding it or showing that image to people, it changes how they perceive you. To tie this back to one of our early questions on today's interview, you talked about branding. Well, branding is a person's perception or gut feeling about you. So when you say I've won an Academy Award or I'm Tony nominated, whatever, fill in the blank, it means things to people because they say, well, if he's good enough for them, he might be good enough for us, or he must be good enough for us. So those things do matter in shaping people's perception and an impression about you.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. So we're going to go to the second segment, and this is I hand it over to Dallin Taylor from Dallin Taylor Productions. I wish I could say, oh, no relation, or
just a small relation.
Just a small. All right, there you go.
Switch seats.
Yep. And of course, we'll edit that out.
Yeah, a whole lot of nepotism going on over here.
You got to take advantage of when you can.
Oh, yeah. Chris, thank you for being here, man. Seriously. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
The work of you, Blair Enns, and like Seth Godin, and a lot of people you interview have impacted my business so much and have helped me practice in a lot more, I guess, healthy way. So I really appreciate that. I guess I want to start it out with building a brand, and building a world is more the right phrasing. Yeah. You interviewed with Seth Godin, and you guys talked about something called practical empathy, kind of assuming that the consumer doesn't really care about your product, or and the whole thing with that is I was trying to see if you were able to expand on how you can sort of build a world in a place where content moves so fast.
Now, for what angle are you looking for in terms of how I should frame the answer? Are you looking from a service provider or one who lives in that world?
I guess a service provider. Yeah. Yeah.
So are you looking to help shape an experience for your customers, or your clients basically, and build a relationship with their customers? Is that the...
Yeah, I guess an easier way to frame it would be more like for like music videos and artists, like you were talking about. For example, like Astro World from Travis Scott, he did a really good job of, like, I know world is in the title, but he did a good job of like building a brand with a world within it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to help artists you want to do world building for artists? Is that what you're thinking?
I would love to. Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Okay. So there's a couple different approaches, and I'll go over the two that I can think of right now. You can look at building a brand around a personality, their lives, their life experiences, their beliefs, their core values, and you can start to build it around that. So if Travis, for example, is really into certain things like anime or comic books or something like that, you can start to build it around that. And you can get to the core, like, origin story of why Travis decided to become a musician, artist, or why he chose the kind of music that he did. And if you trace it back, there's almost always a seminal moment when someone shifts from being who they were to who they are. And we as service providers help to unearth that story because people have blind spots. They can't see anything special or unique about their entire life experience, because for them, that is the baseline for normal. We are most familiar with our own story and our life experiences. And Mark Manson writes about this in The Subtle Art of Not Giving It an F. He writes that we are historically the worst judge of our own value. And the same is true about telling our own story. So an external person such as yourself can start to interview and ask questions, and things that will like light you up, that person's completely unaware of until they tell you, and then they see your expression change. So you're going to define it around these moments, and then you're going to start to build around that. And you're going to need to define a tone of voice, a visual identity system, and to create the kind of experience that Travis wants or whatever artist wants. I'm reading, or I was listening to an interview with the band from 21 Pilots. I never understood like where 21 Pilots came from, and it was said that during school he was reading a book, and it was such a gripping story about how a pilot was told to go and shoot down 21 pilots in his own airplane, or don't come back. You either take them out or you don't. And so that becomes the genesis of the name of the band and how they build an identity around that. So you're looking for clues in a person's past, their origin, and their transformation. And you put all of your creativity into that, and you tell that story in the most powerful, succinct, and impactful way. A second way to do this is to look at the community in which you want to serve. Is there a coalition of shared values and beliefs? And if so, it's said that that's a tribe. So what you do is you try to look at what the tribe wants and needs, and to try to then design an experience specifically for them. I'm more in favor of the second approach than the first approach when I'm doing work for clients, because at the end of the day, it's a much more direct line to profit in building a business when you find a problem that you can solve and then you solve that problem, versus inventing a solution and then finding people who need that solution. It sounds similar, but it's actually quite different.
I love that. I love both of those concepts. Thank you. Yeah, you answered a couple of my other questions as well. I guess moving on real quick, because I do a lot of short form content for real estate agents, and I know the future is dominating with a lot of that kind of stuff, especially YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. Do you have any advice for creating, I guess, more powerful short form content?
Yes, there's a couple of things you need to know. The algorithm controls what people see, so it's important for you to conceptually understand it. I'm not talking about like little hacks about using specific hashtags or something, but foundational skills, understand what the algorithm does, right? There's two things that drive viewership for any video. One is what you would call like your click-through rate, your CTR. So of 100 people that it shows your video to, either in the thumbnail or in the title, how many people actually click through? And so you need to get that number as high as possible. So there's a little design, a little magic that's involved, and where you are trying to pair up an image with the phrase so that the two complement each other. I've been told that you don't want to duplicate those things because you're wasting one half of the power. So if in the title it says how to build a business, and in the thumbnail it says how to build a business, that's an overlap. But if you say how to build a business, in the thumbnail is a person who is like literally opening shop or somehow roping in customers, then those two start to work together. We'll identify with a person, we'll identify with the business, and it gives us more information to decide, should I click through to watch this video? The next part, at least in YouTube terms, is called, what the heck is it called? It's not engagement, but basically you're looking at the graph to see how far someone watches a piece of content. And so you'll notice that in your own videos, if you look at your analytics, the first 30 seconds, you're probably going to experience like 50% of the people dropping off. So the people who are very good at doing this know how to draw the audience in and to keep them engaged for as long as possible. So this will help determine the completion rate. So the goal is to get as close to 100% as possible. So that will tell the algorithm, people like this content, we should send it to more people, and then it starts to grow that way. Now, there are some tricks that you can use to keep people and keep them to the end. First of all, you don't want to tell people everything they need to know at the beginning, because once I know what I need to know, I'm not going to watch. I know this is really super counterintuitive. So if you want to do that, You're like, here are the 3 secrets to winning in life, 1, 2, and 3. End the video right there. Don't talk about anything else because your completion rate will be very high. What I like to do is to value stack it towards the middle end and then build up to it. First of all, people don't know who you are. They need to understand what's going on. So they need a little bit of context. So you have to pull them in while dropping clues. If you study infomercials, they're genius at doing this. There's some wild visual demonstration or something that's completely out of context. So we're thinking, what the F is going on? And they're saying, I've discovered a way to lose weight without strenuous exercise. And I'm going to tell you, but before I tell you, I'm going to tell you about the science about why this works. And then they keep talking about it. And it's not till the very end that they tell you the 1, 2, 3, because they want you to watch as much of that as possible. So if you start to understand those mechanics, then you'll start to be able to engineer videos to draw people in.
Do you see that there is value for a lot of I guess contracted individuals like real estate agents and people who are just trying to sell a brand or service in short form creation content?
Is there value in this?
Yeah, for the exposure and that kind of thing.
Now, if you had asked me this question about 6 months ago, I would say no, not at all. Because what are people doing looking at videos on real estate? And then I'm noticing certain trends happening on Instagram where I see that there are brokers who do a wonderful job of shooting very short montages of beautiful properties. And I want to see more of them. And they're highly targeted towards people in a certain community and vicinity, right? I don't need to grow an international reach if all I'm doing is servicing homes in Los Angeles. So what they do is they usually use videos or stills and they show you beautiful properties because it helps me to imagine myself there. And so what happens is I will follow them because these are such beautifully curated, well-produced homes that all of a sudden I get excited. And so now they're getting top of mind awareness. And how often is it that people are going to follow a real estate agent? Probably never, unless you give them a reason to show up and to care about what it is that you're doing. So I'm now recommending to people, especially in the real estate space, take beautiful photos, curate the heck out of these things, or shoot some really amazing videos. Or you can point out some really interesting novel features like this home sells for X money, but the one thing that you didn't know was it has a underground parking structure for 5 additional cars. And let me show you how that works. And you would just highlight that one part because that has a certain wow factor to it. And so there's a lot of creative ways to show off real estate and establish that association that when you think of real estate in this city of a certain caliber, you think of this one person.
I see. Thank you. I know we're running out of time, so I have one more question. Do you have any advice on building a team? I am gotten to this point where I need to outsource editing and maybe some other things as well.
Yeah, I think you have to make a list with 2 columns in it. Essential things that only Dallin can do and everything else. And at first you'll keep everything on the left column. And then you'll start to realize, do I have to be the person who's editing this? No, someone else can edit it. Your internal creative will fight you. That person will say, well, they're not going to edit as efficiently as I will. They don't have that same sense of rhythm as I do, right? And no one can do it just like me. 100% true. I've heard people talk about this. It's like the 70-70 or 140 rule. Like if you can hire 2 people who can do it at 70% of what you can do it for, that basically means you're getting 1.4x of what you would be able to do. And so this is a skill of leadership and management and entrepreneurship, is to be able to delegate and potentially systematize the things that you do, the decisions that you make, and then be able to scale up. Let's talk about this a little bit deeper. We'll focus specifically on editing, okay? Now, when it comes to editing, there are probably a number of decisions that you're making on an autonomic level. You're doing it automatically without thought. You need to sit down and say, okay, what am I looking for? Why do I decide to put these clips in this sequence, and how do I get the edit to flow? And you want to write these things down. Then what you do is you onboard a junior person who's looking for an opportunity, maybe someone who's always been fascinated about film and editing, and they know the tools, but they don't know how to cut it the way you do. And you try and explain it to them. And you say, work on this edit. It'll take you longer than it will take me. And accept that this is part of the process. And so they're going to come to you and they're going to show you an edit, and you're going to be able to point out a few things. What you want to do is you want to look back at the criteria for a good edit, and you want to say, see this part here? This part's a little funny because of rule number 1. is I'm looking for flow, or I'm looking for this, or the color correction is way off. And so they can go down a checklist. So they don't have to guess what you want because it's been written down. So when you critique the work, point to this list, they're going to start to learn the system, or they won't. You need to just get rid of them. Don't expect the first experience to be a home run. You could get lucky, but don't expect it. So what you've done now is you've codified your process and the way you make decisions, and you've been able to translate this to another human. That means you can theoretically not scale infinitely, but you can scale pretty quickly. If you think about the genius that Roy Kroc brought to McDonald's, was he systematized everything. There's only so much ketchup and mustard per hamburger, and it's made this way, and he wants to get it out in a very specific way so that no matter where you are in the world, when you order a McDonald's Big Mac, it's going to taste for the most part the same.
Well said. Chris, I know we're running out of time. I'm going to switch it back over to Tony. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dallin.
Hey, as we close, man, I want to tell you, thank you for being so amazing. Thank you for rocking with us. This is really good. You've not only blessed us, but I know the listeners and the viewers are getting some really good value, just so they can know, just in case they're not familiar with who you are, and where can they find you? Where can we get your book? It's called
Pocket Full of Dough.
Pocket Full of Dough. I know it's catchy. Right. Yeah, where can we get the book from?
Yes. So you can find me on most social platforms. I'm at the Chris Doe, and Doe is spelled D-O. And the company that I run, the educational company I run, is called The Future. It's F-U-T-U-R. There's no E, future.com. And anything you want to find out about us and the courses and the resources that we have, many of which are totally free, just go to thefuture.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. It's been such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.
That was great. If you enjoyed this podcast, well, I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you're still here with us, what I want you to do is head over to your favorite podcast and streaming network and give us a download, subscribe to the channel, and also let us know what you think about the show. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for the things that you've done. Thank you for the things that you're doing. And especially thank you for the things that you're going to do, because I know that you're going to do something amazing.